Good evening. I'm going to go ahead and open tonight's meeting of the Kalispell City Planning Commission. It's Tuesday, February 11th, 2025. Can I get a roll call?
Rory Young.
Here.
Tim Stockland. Pitt Burke.
Here.
Shelby Lacron.
Here.
Doug Kaufman. Joshua Bogart.
Here.
Chad Graham.
Here. The quorum is present. I'm going to move into approval of the minutes. Is there a motion for approval of the January 14th, 2025 meeting?
I move that we approve the minutes from the meeting of January 14th, 2025.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Any approved, same sign. Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. Move into tonight's Hear the Public. This would be the portion of the meeting where anybody in the audience can give public comment on any item not currently on tonight's agenda. If there's any public comment, please step to the mic, state your name and address. Okay, seeing none, we're going to close Hear the Public. Move.
The PUD overlay and preliminary plat for 96 residential units, which is 53 detached single-family and 43 townhome units on 15.8 acres. And it's located at 489 2 Mile Drive, just to the west of, I believe it's called Landings Apartments, right on 2 Mile, and to the east of the bypass. You can see where the utilities extend down just to the southeastern corner of the property, but they also extend to the property through Teton. And so, both water and sewer are available and immediately adjacent to the property. This is a shot from the apartments looking off to the west. The existing zoning is County R1. Proposed zoning is City RA1. Most of the city zoning in the surrounding area is either RA1 or RA2. The apartments immediately adjacent to RA2. There is some R4 with Greenbrier to the southwest. The growth policy shows it as partly urban residential and partly high-density residential. Urban residential allows up to 12 units per acre, and the high density allows up to 20 units per acre. This proposal is 6.1 units per acre as proposed. It does lie within the annexation boundary. This is showing the general layout. You can see where there's the one access that comes off of 2 Mile Drive and kind of forms a loop road, in a sense, coming around the property. This is an extension of Teton, which comes through the center of the apartments that are to the east. It also provides for future connections. There'd be 3 potential future connections with Teton extending this road and then the road going off to the north towards Liberty. You can see where there's some park areas and open space, both in the southwest corner, a large area through the center of this block, and then some shared common area that I'll show a little more detail on in just a bit. I would note that they are required to have 0.03 acres per unit in parkland, which would be 2.88 acres total, or the equivalent value. So we would include in recreational amenities, things like gazebos or playgrounds. That would be as part of that park layout, as part of meeting that requirement. The applicant has requested 5 deviations related to zoning and 1 deviation related to the subdivision regulations. First, in lot size, under the RA1 zone, minimum lot size is 6,000 square feet. Sublots for townhomes are typically approximately 3,000 square feet. This proposal calls for minimum lot size of 3,200 square feet for single-family lots and 1,200 square feet for sublots. The requested deviation is intended to provide a mix of lot sizes within the subdivision while maintaining consistency within the density limits of the growth policy. The lot size allows for unique configurations with alley-loaded lots and shared common area as part of many of the front yards. The lot size also allows for lower price points in an effort to provide a more attainable cost for prospective buyers. Based on the foregoing, this deviation request is appropriate. Second deviation is related to use, specifically with accessory dwelling units. This deviation is proposed by the applicant in order to help mitigate the deviation related to lot size. The proposed PUD allows for limitations on ADUs. Without the PUD, state law would not allow the subdivision to be conditioned on a prohibition on ADUs. In the context of a PUD, deviations from generally applicable zoning and subdivision standards can be approved and conditioned when requested by the applicant, as is the case in this situation. The limitations provide more certainty in the development of the site and sideboards on the number of units which may be constructed, which in turn provides a benefit to the neighborhood as a PUD rather than developing the property under generally applicable standards. This deviation is also appropriate. Thirdly, lot width. Minimum lot width in the RA1 is 50 feet. This request reduces that to 44. The reduction would allow for sublots at 16 feet in width. With the reduction in lot size, the lot width deviation would be a natural adjustment, and the deviation is appropriate. Next was lot coverage. Maximum lot coverage in the RA1 zone is 45%. Lot coverage includes structures on the property, but not driveways, sidewalks, or similar improvements. The deviation request would allow up to 50%. Allowing the deviation on the smaller lots that are in the subdivision would be more consistent with the proposed lot dimensions. And with the reduction in lot size, this would also be a natural adjustment and the deviation would be appropriate. Next was setbacks. Minimum setbacks in the RA1 are 15 feet in the front and side corner, 10 in the rear, and 5 on the sides. Garages would have a 20-foot front setback or side corner setback if they're on the street. The applicant is requesting 3 reductions. One is a 10-foot front setback, secondly a 10-foot side corner setback, and lastly 0 setback along lot lines that adjoin common areas and parks. They were also providing for a 10-foot side setback for any structures in the common area and the parks, and part of that is to address building and fire code requirements. In addition to the setback, there should also be a provision for a 10-foot no-build easement within the common areas and parks where they border those lots. As with the other deviation requests, the setback reduction for the smaller lot sizes is a natural adjustment reflecting the sizes of the lots, and the deviation is appropriate. The subdivision regulation would relate to alleys as the primary access in street design. As a general rule, alleys should not be the primary means of accessing a lot. Typically, lots are accessed with a 60-foot right-of-way under city design standards. The proposed development utilized the layout where the townhouses and many of the single-family lots front onto shared common area with the 30-foot alley providing access. This type of design has been reviewed and approved in several other subdivisions over the past several years. The shared front yard allows for smaller lot sizes and lower price points for the homes. It also creates an alternative style of home, adding to the mix of housing styles within the overall housing inventory. In this particular layout, the proposal meshes well with the extension of Teton Street, which is a collector road. And on collectors, individual driveways are not allowed, and the alley access would be required for many of the lots in any case. Based on the foregoing, this deviation request is appropriate. And since we've got this blown up here, this just kind of shows in more detail what you're looking at, where you've got the alleys that come through. There'd be 3 of them that would coming down. Lots would be accessed that way, but they would have this shared front yard with the common area. And, you know, again, that's intended to provide some of the smaller lot sizes with some of the shared front yard amenities. It's a little bit of a different style of home, which again we've seen in a few of the subdivisions that have been proposed over the last 4 or 5 years. And this is showing on the southern one, which utilizes the single-family layout. You can see with the alley coming through. Again, this side would be facing onto the common area to the south of those lots. The length of that block would be broken up with pedestrian access that would come through in the center. This is showing the utility layout. There were some engineering comments forwarded to the developer, including extending utilities to far property lines. Would note that they'd be doing a downstream analysis for lift stations and would need to make any upgrades that would be necessary in order to accommodate the flow. There is adequate capacity in both the water and sewer systems to serve the development. The project is served by road connections to 2 Mile Drive and Teton Street. The frontage on 2 Mile would need to be improved to city standards as a major collector, which would include, but not necessarily be limited to, curb gutter, stormwater facilities, sidewalk, landscape, boulevard, street trees, and streetlights. Dedication of additional right-of-way to provide for the additional improvements would be required. Internal to the subdivision, the extension of Teton Street would be designed to the minor collector standard under the standards for design and construction, with the other streets the local standard, except as provided with the deviation that we already discussed related to the street design. They are providing for future connectivity to the adjacent properties, which is a requirement of the subdivision regulations. Again, one off to the north and then two potential extensions off to the west. The alleys shown in the subdivision are part of the PUD deviations and are required to have a 30-foot right-of-way with a 20-foot minimum paved surface and the provision of sidewalks. Since the alleys would not meet the standard street design requirements, they would be required to be privately owned and maintained. It may be necessary to utilize wider right-of-way in order to fit all of the appropriate utilities within the right-of-way width once engineering plans are finalized. A traffic impact study is required for the development, and a TIS has been submitted by the development from Able and Traffic Services dated November of 24 with the January 25 supplement. Under city standards, the developer must maintain or improve the level of service at any impacted intersections. The TIS determined that no mitigation is required, although the intersection of the subdivision road onto 2 Mile Drive should be designed to account for the findings in the TIS. Per public works standards, the TIS should be current at the time of infrastructure construction, and updates may be required. Probably the largest design issue that they're going to be facing has to do with the fact that a significant portion of the property is within the regulatory floodplain. And you can kind of see where it kind of comes through, and most of the southern portion of that property is within an AE zone, which is a type of zone that has an established base flood elevation. So a similar process was followed with the development to the east with those apartments. It's a three-step process. First step, there's a conditional letter of map revision based on fill that they would submit to FEMA. Once they got that and whatever conditions would be attached to that, they would go to the city for a floodplain development permit for the placement of fill. And then the third step is to go back to FEMA, where they would actually make that revision in the map and remove that from the floodplain. Without it being removed from the floodplain, it's not eligible to be subdivided under subdivision regulations. So it's a critical step in the process, and no development on the property should occur until those approvals are in place and installed. A geotech was submitted. Overall site is generally flat without any major topographical or geological features limiting development. That geotech report was from Alpine Geotechnical, dated September of 24. Groundwater was encountered at a depth of 8.2 to 11.3 feet as part of that study. The report did not indicate any impediments to the development of the site, but did include recommendations that should be followed during development relating to mass grading and civil infrastructure. The report itself specifically was limited to grading and infrastructure and did not include building foundations. The subdivision regulations required the report find that the development of the lots would pose no significant geological hazards to either the lots being created or neighboring properties. An updated geotech report should be submitted reflecting, first, the fill material being placed due to the floodplain mitigation and final grading, secondly, the ability to support the houses being proposed, and thirdly, that specific finding. It should also address some comments from the building department related to some previously placed fill on the property. The updated report should be submitted prior to engineering approval by Public Works for any infrastructure on the property. The property is over 200 feet away from West Spring Creek, and no wetlands would impact the development of the property. They're looking at using a construction system that utilizes prefabricated building cells that are assembled and roofed on site. These next couple slides would show some of the designs that they would be using throughout the development. With that, staff would recommend that the Kalispell City Planning Commission adopt Staff Report K24-10, KPUD 2405, and KPP 2406 as findings of fact, and recommend to the Kalispell City Council that 1, the property be annexed and the zoning for the property be City RA1 residential apartment with the PUD overlay. Secondly, that the Vista Ridge Cottages PUD be approved subject to the 35 listed conditions. And thirdly, that the preliminary plat for Vista Ridge Cottages also be approved subject to the 35 listed conditions, and be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions and stuff?
I got one. You said that the TIS was submitted in November or completed then?
That was the date on the original submittal, yes.
Okay.
That was the date of the report. It wasn't necessarily when they took the figures.
So we don't know when the actual study was done, time frame wise?
Keith might.
I don't recall you mean when the data was collected for the traffic? I don't recall the date that they collected the traffic, but anytime you collect traffic data, that has to be adjusted. So, there's adjustment factors based on the day of week, time of year, that they have to apply to that data so that it normalizes the data to any time of year. So.
Okay, I was gonna say, because if it's been done in November, traffic from summer has already gone away, so there's only like holiday travel. So my only concern is 2 miles already kind of crazy as it is with that weird S curve that goes from, regular 2 mile down toward the landings. It's just crazy, and especially in the wintertime. So if the road was able to maybe get expanded a little bit to make room for all those cars, that would make some sense if that applies to this at all. But if not, then that's just my curiosity.
Other questions?
PJ, I just want to clarify a couple things. I thought I heard you say that the alleys are getting a 30-foot right-of-way?
It's a 30-foot right-of-way with a 20-foot paved surface, right?
So who's going to own the alley?
Homeowners Association, be privately owned.
And why does it have a right-of-way then?
It's private right-of-way. You have public
So
or
it's an
private
easement,
right-of-ways.
not a right-of-way.
No, it's separate, because an easement would be that would be on the actual property that's being owned on both sides, but it would be a separately owned right-of-way that would be owned by the homeowners association is how we would do that.
Okay, so it's
I know
almost
in the
like
coun-
a
in the
common
counties-
or a utility lot as opposed to, okay.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes you see that differently in the county where they'd have an easement that would go through and be split between the two property lines, but that's not how we would do those.
Okay. But the homeowners association will own and maintain everything within the right-of-way.
Correct. Within the alley rights of way. They'd be city streets.
Not the utilities, but the surfacing, yes. Well, there'll be water and sewer utilities in the alleys, and that's why the 30 feet is necessary to accommodate the horizontal offset between water and sewer. But city will still own and maintain the utilities, water and sewer. The alley maintenance would be the homeowners association's responsibility.
Okay, thanks. And then just one more, Keith, while you're on. Maybe I misheard, but we are requiring a downstream analysis, but we're also saying that they have adequate water and sewer. Maybe I missed something
So,
there.
yeah, typically what we put in there is when we're talking about the capacity, it's with the capacity in the system. So they still would need to analyze and make sure that there's enough capacity to manage the flow within that lift station.
It's a standard requirement for anything that's upstream of a lift station. So with that, landings at 2 mile, they had to install a lift station to accommodate their flows. And my recollection is it's actually oversized quite a bit. And so I don't anticipate there being any issues. And certainly the downstream gravity mains are adequate. We also, as part of that project, had the developer install a dry force main to accommodate future growth in that area if it continues to the west, which may or may not happen. But anyway, just to make sure we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's, if there were any upgrades necessary to accommodate this, it would likely just be pump upgrades.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I had. Thanks.
Well, I guess I have a question, and if I missed it, I apologize. I know I heard you say something about the ADUs in there, but do we have anything that's guaranteeing the 53 detached single family, that's what they're going to be? Was there anything in there that...
Yeah, well, I guess there could be a couple things. One is, to have townhomes, you need to create the sublots on there. And so the PUD is laying out those as 53 lots that would just support single family. The other aspect of that is, generally speaking, you can't prohibit ADUs under state law with that. But in the context of a PUD, that's something that an applicant can propose in conjunction with, in this case, having smaller lot sizes, which does kind of make it a little bit easier to have those parameters and sideboards on what's coming through.
I was going more along the lines of it, the duplex end of it. in single family.
What do you mean the
Well,
duplex?
duplexes by right.
It
Like
is, but
single
in the
family.
in the context of proposing the PUD and what the layout plan is, it would be 53 single family.
It would be what?
It would just be the single family on there within the townhomes. So that's what they would have
Okay.
in terms of their approval here. as
Okay,
far
because
as-
I wanted to make sure about that because the other things in here are the downstream analysis and then the traffic impact study. And so if we're good that we're talking about 53 detached, single family, then.
Yeah, I think we are, and I think that having the proposal from the applicant, and they're including that in their covenants as well, that they be limited to those
Got it.
uses there, that puts a little bit more certainty on looking at those numbers as we're doing something like that downstream analysis.
Right, and that helps me because, then I know what I'm actually approving too, for in my mind. And that, to me, that's one of the problems with 382 is that it can go through and throw it out there to where, you approve something and then something else goes through and happens and you don't, have any, it can impact, downstream analysis or traffic impact studies. So, okay, that helps.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions?
I had one more. So this maybe it shouldn't be off topic. So last meeting we had the public comment about the concerns about the north border with that other property that's still there. Were any adjustments made to the northern border to kind of protect that property from any sort of issues that may arise from this? Or is that just what we're looking at based on the last meeting as well? Nothing else has been
There was
added.
no change from that. I know that the people that made that comment were encouraged to talk to the developer, and they didn't reach out to the developer to talk about that.
Okay.
It's difficult for the city to put some kind of a condition on there where there's a concern that somebody's going to trespass onto their property and do something with their livestock or their land.
No, of course.
But no, there weren't any changes made there, but I'd still say, it would be an open invitation to have that discussion with the developer, and if there was something that they could do to make that better, that's where that, as Chad mentioned last time, that's where that discussion should happen.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and open this item up for public comment. For public comment, step to the mic and your name and address.
So, we're at 212 3 Mile, we're part of the property that's north of it. I guess some of my concerns, and I think maybe some of the people also on the other sides of the development are, and forgive me, I'm no engineer, I don't know exactly how all this works, but if it's a floodplain, to my understanding, is if they're having to bring in material to bring it up, I'm assuming it's all gonna be graded out to where it's not gonna be, the drainage will not be affecting any of the properties adjoining it, I hope. And then I've wondered since this started happening, I guess, we heard that this was going on. Probably a year ago, we noticed all the mounds that were gathering up in this property. I don't know if anybody's been out there to see these. But, so it's not just this flat pasture that it once was. There's mounds of dirt all over it. And we're kind of curious what the story is with those, where they came from. So I guess that's kind of our major concerns at this point with some of this.
Thank you, sir.
What was his name?
I guess I want to know, what is the
Sorry,
setback?
can we get a name?
Oh, my name's Lindsay Fisher.
Thank you.
That was my husband, Lucas.
Lucas? Okay, thank you.
Lucas and Lindsay Fisher. The setback, what's the setbacks minimum from the development from our property? Is it 30 feet or what is,
So for right now, we're just taking comments. So we
Okay.
can, write what we
Yeah.
have down and we'll address it later, but we'll just take comments
No,
for
that's
now. So
fine.
yeah.
okay. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments? Okay, Gonna close that, seeing no comments, and look to the commission for a motion on KA 24-10.
I move that the Kalispell City Planning Commission adopt staff report KA 24-10 as findings of fact. And recommend that the Kalispell City Council, that the property be annexed and the zoning be City RA1 with a PUD overlay.
Second.
Motion seconded. Any discussion on the annexation?
Within the boundaries and
The annexation is
the
pretty
map, so
straightforward.
that's pretty clear and cut, I think.
Okay, roll call.
Joshua Bogart,
Aye.
Shelby Leckron,
Aye.
Pitt Burke,
I
Rory Young,
Aye.
Chad Graham.
Aye. Okay, annexation passes. I'm gonna look for a motion on the KPUD 24-05, the PUD.
I didn't have that recommendation.
I'm looking for a motion on the
I just
PUD.
wanna grab.
I can do it, it's fine. I move that the Kalispell City Planning Commission adopt staff report KPUD 24-05 as findings of fact and recommend to the Kalispell City Council that the Vista Ridge Cottages PUD be approved subject to the conditions listed below.
Is there a second? A motion seconded. Discussion on the PUD for the planned unit development.
Can we have staff answer the question about the setback?
Yeah,
Just for-
if you wanna
Okay.
answer
Well,
that.
stepping through a few of those, first of all, setbacks, rear setbacks would be 10 feet. That's pretty standard throughout the city for setbacks and really almost any zone that's out there except for the industrial zones. With the question relating to the fill that would be brought in, at this point, the specifics of that aren't worked out about the amount of fill. That we need to work that out with FEMA, establish what that base flood elevation is relative to the elevation on the ground, and then bring in fill to do that. It would need to be engineered fill and compacted and clean, which would also be necessary to, put buildings on that property. And Keith can expand on this part if he wants to, but as a general rule, there would be stormwater facilities that would be in there. You can't have runoff going off the property at a greater rate than what was going off pre-development. That'd be part of their engineered stormwater design.
Yeah, there's a standard condition in our design report requirements to review any adverse impacts for downstream properties. So you have to allow existing onflow to continue to onflow. You have to match your historic offlow rate and location. And if you have increases in volume, which every development does because they're increasing impervious, then you also do downstream analysis to verify that you're not creating any adverse impacts on downstream properties.
I think maybe I misunderstood, or I understood the question to be different in that if we're filling inside the floodplain as part of the floodplain development permit, the applicant will need to show that by displacing that amount of water from the floodplain, you're not creating additional flooding somewhere else, right? That's part of that. The floodplain development permit is to show that you don't have an adverse effect on adjoining or neighboring properties by displacing the water from the floodplain.
Extent, I think both of those would be related because regardless of what the floodplain answer would be, that would be what you'd be dealing with the stormwater as part of that. So when you're talking about filling in the floodplain, there's two parts to the regulatory floodplain. And so there's the floodway and then there's the fringe area that comes off. In that fringe area, it's expected that you do a certain amount of filling, and they establish that floodway where you can do filling up to that point and would have a 6-inch rise or less. And under the FEMA regulations and our regulations, that's an acceptable amount of rise based on that. So if there was floodway here, they could not fill that floodway. You can barely touch the floodway. But because it's floodway fringe, and you've got the established base flood elevation, they can do that amount of filling that would come into that, and that's part and kind of built into the flood studies that are there. But that's also why they have to go through that multi-step process, which includes FEMA. I don't know, because you close.
No, no.
It was a comment on what you were asking in
We're-
regards to the setback in the rear of those northern properties.
Yeah, but we're in discussion right now.
Okay.
Anyhow, so,
And then the.
that was,
sorry.
did you get your question answered?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have?
No, no.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, so the other aspect of it is that I was gonna also point out was, yeah, so with development, it retaining its own, its runoff, it kind of goes to when you develop that piece of property, it doesn't shed off onto neighboring properties. That's why you have the water retention ponds.
Right, I believe that they were looking at least one of those in this corner down through here, which is one reason why it's some of that open space is part of that. But yeah, that's a standard part of city subdivision review.
Okay. Any other questions? Or discussion? Discussion. All right, get a roll call.
Rory Young,
Aye.
Joshua Bogart,
Aye.
Pitt Burke,
Aye.
Shelby Leckron,
Aye.
Chad Graham.
Aye. All right, motion carries. Look for a motion for KPP 24-06, the preliminary plat.
I move that KPB-24-06, the preliminary plat approval for 96 residential units of 53 detached single and 43 attached single-family townhouses on the allotted acreage, including lots, roads, and common areas, be approved and recommended to the city council for approval at located 4892 Mile Drive.
Second?
Motion seconded. Any question or any discussion? No more questions? No.
You got it.
No discussion? Okay, I think by this point it's all pretty clear, so, roll call.
Pitt Burke,
Aye.
Joshua Bogart,
Aye.
Shelby Leckron,
Aye.
Rory Young,
Aye.
Chad Graham.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. When does this come before city council?
So it'd be at the March 3rd council meeting for first reading.
March 3rd, so March 3rd back in this, chamber for a city council, meeting. So we're gonna go ahead and close tonight's, public hearing, move into old business.
Okay, so old business, at the last meeting, there was the zoning text amendment for the Skybridge setbacks. That got forwarded to city council. They did have some discussion on that, but did pass unanimously, so it'd be moving to second reading on the 18th on the consent agenda.
Okay, new business.
So new business, we do have a couple things in for next month. One is MDOT is looking at annexing their facility up at Rose Crossing, and part of that was they'd be doing a new facility up at that area, so there'd be a companion conditional use permit. So they'd be moving a lot of their equipment up to that location. Second thing would be a conditional use permit for Renaissance Senior Care, which is on Liberty Street. Now, they'd be adding 2 beds within their existing facility. I guess just as a note on that, we allow, they've gotten an original CUP. We allow 25% increases, which they'd already done, so this would be moving beyond that. They need to come back in for a new CUP on that one. We'd also be looking at doing another step in our land use plan work sessions. And then depending upon how you wanted to handle the reserve at Johnson Ranch, probably a follow-up work session on that.
Okay. All right, so immediately adjourning our meeting tonight, we're going to move into our work session. There's a couple items on there. The first is file KA 25-01, KGPA 25-01, KPUD 25-01, and KPP 25-01 Spartan Holdings LLC and Whispering Trails LLC have submitted applications for the reserve at Johnson Ranch, including requests for annexation, growth policy amendment to create a neighborhood business and high-density residential node at the northwest corner of intersection of Old Reserve Drive and Stillwater Road. With amending an additional portion along the north side of Stillwater Road from suburban residential to urban residential. Initial zoning of R3 residential, RA1 residential apartment, RA2 residential apartment office, and B1 neighborhood business with a plan unit development overlay, and preliminary plat for approval of 186 single-family residential lots, 2 multifamily lots, 1 containing 397 units and 1 with an unspecified number of units, and 1 commercial lot on approximately 91.8 acres, including lots, roads, and common areas. The second item tonight is our ongoing legislative update for Senate Bill 382, updating our growth policy. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. So I'll start in on the work session. As any work session, feel free to jump in if there are any questions, because it's a little less formal format. I think Corey's got something, though.
Yeah, I need to recuse myself for this. This is my client.
Okay.
If it's a work session,
Later.
are you gonna send me out?
Later, get out of here.
Good night, Rory.
Oh, we should have done
Don't
the
go
other one
too far.
first, so he could go home.
No, I want him to sit there.
Okay. So as was mentioned, we did receive applications for reserve at Johnson Ranch, which included annexation, growth policy amendment. Essentially what we'd be doing there would be creating, which we have at a number of intersections and the outlying parts of town, would be a neighborhood business and high density node, which doesn't exist there right now, but there are a number of those throughout the planning jurisdiction. There'd be the initial zoning of R3, RA1. They did include in their application for RA2, but I think that's one of the things that would likely be changed, because RA2 also allows offices, and that's not really part of what the proposal is. So that'd probably be changing to just RA1 with no RA2. Then there would also be that B1 area, about 10 acres, right at that intersection. The preliminary plat, as you mentioned, would have 186 single-family lots, the 2 multifamily. The application kind of overstated, I guess, the number of units. That was what went out, was the 300 and some on the public notice. It's actually 237, and that would be approximately in that area. There's also that still an unspecified number that would be up on the north side of Stillwater Road.
237 versus 397?
Correct. Yep.
237?
Wait, so the 397 is not correct, it's
237.
It's down to 237, yeah. And then there would be, again, that 1 commercial lot. And it's just right off of the, if people don't know, there'd be that roundabout that would be right there where Old Reserve kind of comes in, just right by Glacier High School. This is looking at the property from the north, I believe, looking down to the south, right off of Stillwater Road. The existing zoning is Ag 80 on the southern portion, which is about 80 of the 90-some acres. It's SAG 5 on that northern portion. The growth policy shows that it's high-density residential through the southern portion of that, and then urban residential through the remainder of that 80 acres. And again, what that growth policy amendment would do would be to create one of those nodes coming through here where you'd have the neighborhood business in this area. You'd have the high-density residential running right through here. You'd have the urban residential that would come up and extend through here, and then they would also change this from suburban to urban residential on the 15 acres that are on the north side of Stillwater Road. This is showing in a little bit more detail. Again, right here is where you'd have the 237 multifamily on the RA1 lot. And again, up here, additional multifamily with an unspecified number at this point. This would be that B1 node coming right off of the roundabout area. And that growth policy would then follow these boundaries, as would the zoning districts would also follow those boundaries. Remainder would be the 186 single family. You can see the green, there would be some open space right at that intersection. And then a larger area here that would be a combination of drainage area as well as park area. There'd also be a little nook out of here where there would be a well site for a property that'd be developing in the county on the other side of Stillwater Road. Within that B1, again, it was 10 acres. And really kind of the core of what they're asking for in the PUD is generally there's limitations on retail to no more than 4,000 square feet. This would be asking for a 40,000 square foot neighborhood grocery store that would be in there with a total of 110,000 square feet on the entire 10 acres that then would be in compliance with the general B1 standards. This is showing the plat. Probably the one thing to note here was they're showing a mid-block crossing that would need to get flipped over to that intersection. There's a fair amount of grade on the property in two different locations, one of which is coming down about 50-foot drop in grade, I believe, from this west property boundary as you're coming down through here. None of those grades would be exceeding 25%, which is one of the key thresholds under the zoning regulations, but they will develop some additional information on that as well as the proposed grading plan. The other spot where you see some of the grading or some of the steeper grades is over where that park area, which would be up in this general area, and then the stormwater facility, which would be at the bottom part of that grade. This is showing the phasing plan. They were looking at phase 1 starting up in the northeastern corner. And again, north is to the top or to the left of this page. So you'd be coming down Stillwater and going in that direction out that way. One of the things that we were discussing with them is, generally speaking, when you do a plat, you'd be doing the full frontage of the improvements to that property. In this particular situation, a lot of that, because when phase 1 develops, they're going to need to develop this common area for their storm drainage, and that would be part of the plat, which means that under their phasing plan, if you apply the general rule, they'd be doing the frontage through here, but then also all the way down and all the way up to the northern portion of that property, which puts a lot of front-loaded cost on the project. So we were looking at doing something where they could develop these frontages as some of the other development happens on the site, rather than just in conjunction with this phase 1. And again, as I noted, there would be some questions as well as what would be happening with that well site. It was a little bit of an open question about what kind of protection zones they'd have there, how much of what they're doing in terms of parkland, for example, could be incorporated within that well area. And then also potential questions on water rights that might be associated with that.
Got a question for you.
Sure.
On that unspecified number of units up north,
Right.
how many is the max you can put in there? Or that they would want?
Part of it depends upon how you look at that. It'd probably be in the neighborhood of 14 units per acre. And so that's about, it was a little under 5 acres that would be there. So, in theory, you could see something up towards 70 in that direction. But one thing that we were asking from them is if they wanted to have an allocation of density up there, that there should be some at least conceptual idea of what was happening on that site. Because we didn't just want to say, oh, you can have X number of units on that without developing it a little bit more. So
Right.
nothing inherently wrong with it, but just fleshing it out a little bit more.
Okay.
This is showing the park layout. Again, one of the things that they would be doing as part of the PUD would be developing a little bit more of a walking path that would unify that development from the southern portion all the way up to where they would have the park area. And again, particularly because there's park area up there. As is pretty typical, we don't have a detailed landscape or a park plan at this point in time. But that'd be the general concept, would be utilizing a lot of that space up there for parkland. In addition to that, when you're doing the apartment developments, they need to do 500 square feet of land or the equivalent value with recreational amenities on that property. And typically that's done in conjunction with the building permit on that project. Lots of times you see barbecue areas, gazebos. We really like to encourage the barbecue areas so that you don't have fire code issues with grills on the decks and so forth. They did submit a traffic impact study, and I put the finding up here. Essentially they were looking at potential left turn lanes, again, also depending upon whether a right-in, right-out approach or something different was allowed by MDT off of Reserve Drive. But they weren't finding any required mitigation beyond those left turn lanes. But I would note the TIS did not include that area to the north of Stillwater where there was the potential for the additional units on the north side. So they should need to update that TIS prior to a final submittal on that to reflect that better as to what's actually being constructed. And we did mention they need a little bit more of a conceptual plan for the apartment area up in here. They would need quite a bit of more of a conceptual plan on the B1 area at that intersection. 10 acres is a little bit more than what you would typically see on one of those nodes, but it's still supportable under the growth policy. But a lot of the key to that is you're looking at an elevated design in terms of architectural appearance, landscaping, buffering, just how it all comes together. And at this point, we don't really have too much really in either one of these that would show, or any one of the three of those that would show really even conceptually what that design is. And so there's probably a little bit more work that needs to go into that to be able to support that fully. With that, I don't know if you guys have any additional questions or anything along those lines, or.
With the roundabout that's right there on the corner, that manages Reserve and Stillwater, is that still going to be an effective use of directing traffic, or do they need to stick a light in there because of the high school?
No, I think it would still be a roundabout.
Okay.
Just in general, a little feedback, as the engineers and developers look at trying to paint a little more complete picture would be appreciated. In general, what they've tried to do, it is an infill parcel. It's surrounded by county. There's a county subdivision to the west. You've got basically city development to the east. The city development to the east does have urban residential land use category all the way to the northern property boundary. The one thing the developer has done is kind of flip the high density part where it's kind of east-west right now to more north-south, because what that does is with that slope and that hillside, they could focus some of those larger single-family lots up against what are right now county single-family homes and concentrate some of the more intensive uses there along Stillwater, which seemed like a good idea. So just general thoughts. Like I said, that main kind of road going through would be a kind of like a spine connector road with a trail system that's trying to interconnect all the development, the multifamily, the commercial, the housing, so it becomes, a walkable neighborhood.
I like the idea of having a small grocery store there. I guess my input would be at the roundabout, you're looking at parking though. So if there's some way that we could make that corner, I guess that's what the southeast corner, a little more attractive rather than looking at just, I don't know. I mean, the backside of a grocery store is not that impressive either. And I know you've got loading and all of that to deal with. So, but I don't know if you could just kind of make that a little better. And I appreciate that the lower density is up against the west side, like that. I think that is going to be appreciated by the neighbors. Like that is quite a lot that they're trying to fit in there, but it is better than having the high density. So appreciate the thought that went into that. And then I don't know what the sidewalks, I guess, they're not connected anyway to the high school or across. Like there's no crosswalks or anything, correct? Or there are none required even, or what do we?
Yeah, there's a section on the south end of the east side that doesn't have sidewalk, but I believe there is sidewalk along Reserve.
So this connects. It will connect. Correct?
Yeah.
Oh.
I think
Thank
right
you.
there.
Right there, okay, yeah, cool, thank you. Oh, but does the sidewalk continue all the way around from the business all the way on Reserve, or it is gonna be continuous?
The frontage along Reserve on this
Yeah,
project?
uh-huh.
Yeah,
Okay.
a standard requirement would be for either a sidewalk or pedestrian path, depending on the
Got it,
type
okay,
there.
cool. I think that's all I had.
Yeah, I think the points taken is I appreciate them coming in with, a preliminary concept of what they're looking to do. I like the idea of having that business node. So, you have that multi-use factor with it where, hey, let's go to the grocery store. Oh, it's right there. You don't have to drive all the way into town to do that, or gas station or whatnot. And then definitely the undetermined portion of it up here. I mean, when it's ready for prime time, we would need to have more of an idea of what we're looking at on that. But so, I mean, I imagine it's going back to another work session.
That would be our recommendation, but
Yeah.
that's part of what you want to see there. But I think what we're anticipating is, working with the developer to try to put that together and hopefully bring that back for a follow-up work session next month.
I like, the attempt to do some blending, if you will, on that west side, up on the hill, doing some blending from one use of, one style of housing down or density of housing or size, and blending that down into the bottom as kind of a buffer. So I like that idea. So I think it's, pointing towards, it's on the right track, but just more detail for the next work session, I suppose.
Okay.
So, yeah, okay, we'll move into, so, I think the second one being our, continued, update. So this is our fourth in the series of, our update. So was there one part of this you were wanting to do first?
Yeah, I think we got a couple representatives from Department of Revenue here that we're going to step through some things, so we'll probably do them
I guess real quick, I just asked if there was, for the last one, was there public comment
first. Yeah.
for the,
We do have someone online here. Maybe, does anybody online, if you wish to speak, you can raise your hand.
okay,
I think we're good.
all right.
You'll be quick to raise your hand.
You do?
I know. Quick to raise your hand.
So, on that particular, the corner there where there's the roundabout, she was talking about it a little bit, the proximity to the high school, the safety for kids running across that roundabout, it just seems a little intuitively chaotic, because if I'm a freshman, I'm going to go get some food. You know what I mean? And I want that to be noted. I'm not saying that it needs to be changed, but having a light there or something to be very designative, at which, I mean, you're a high school kid and you want to be able to like go hang out at the store. I think that's going to happen more than we think it is in theory, because I would. I'm just letting you know. So just pointing that out.
Any other questions on our work session that we closed?
Yeah, one more, sorry.
Yeah,
With-
close.
With the street parking for that, in like the neighborhood for those single units, is it possible to get more detail, like how wide those streets are gonna be for individualized parking per unit? Because there's gonna be obviously driveways, I would assume, so then is there gonna be at all on-street parking for any of those homes?
Right, they
Possibly.
would be in a lot of ways, this is more typical than what you would be seeing with a lot of other developments that have come through. So, like anything else, they'd have 60-foot right-of-ways that would be going through there. The lot sizes are 7,000 square feet. Our minimum lot size typically is 6,000. So with a lot of them that we've seen have been much smaller. As we start getting smaller than 6, we get a little more concerned about that. But this would be a pretty standard layout in the single-family side as far as fitting the driveways and on-street parking and so forth.
So we'll move on to the second item. And you were saying you wanted to start with a certain.
Yeah, there's 3 different presentations that we're looking at tonight. First one would be Revenue, kind of discussing the property appraisal and taxation, since that's a key component of what we should all understand as we're moving forward with the land use plan. We also have someone from the Parks Department that will be talking about the parks plans that are out there. And then Keith was going to talk a little bit more about some of the non-city utilities and how we interact with them, with, say, like electric, for example. But anyway, the first one we turn over to Department of Revenue.
Hi, my name is Dawn Cordone. I'm an appraiser with the Department of Revenue. And thanks a lot, PJ, for giving me taxation. It's real simple, and I'm supposed to do it in 10, 15 minutes. But the important part I hope you get from this, what my goal is to share with you the process, because listening to your responsibilities as far as making these kinds of big decisions, understanding obviously the result of that on how the valuations will occur for these different types of property is an important part, like PJ said, of your overall work. The second slide is simply just a general understanding that there are obviously 56 counties and multiple regions. These actually do fall in a very market type area as well. As you can imagine, Northwest Montana has been found, and we're growing tremendously. And then, of course, Southwest Montana. The rest of Montana is slowly catching up, but still not as densely populated. So the next slide goes into the importance of understanding basically right now the three legs of taxation when it relates to properties taxes. The valuation, which is what the property assessment does, the legislation, which determines the classifications that we apply to properties that affects their tax rate, and then, of course, the mill levies, which the individual taxing jurisdictions determine. So we provide all those classification and valuations, and we do it based on the market, which is interesting to listen to you guys. I thought we had a challenging job, but you guys obviously are mostly looking the future. We're trying to analyze a very emotional market that occurs in the past and apply it to today's valuations. When jurisdictions see large increases in taxable value, they're not allowed to keep the mill levies at the same level. So we don't set, obviously, those mill levies. The individual taxing jurisdictions determine their budgets based on the values we provide them that then get multiplied by the tax rates determined on classification. They set their mills and collect their taxes. Of course, it's important to remember that there is a separate mill levy calculation on voted mills. And that's hard for you. I mean, that's like a moving target, obviously, for you guys to try and make some future decisions. Property taxes are an ad valorem tax, which is, especially with us being found and the values increasing so dramatically, causes a lot of people grief. But if we could, from my perspective, it's easier to start with that number that's not based on something that Dawn just decides to put on there. It's based on these market transactions that occurred that are similar to your property, whether you like that these out-of-staters or investors or whoever bought these properties, because the other two components, the other two legs, the tax rate and the mill levies, are so important. It's easier to defend and justify that market value than if we go to what some other states do, which is the county assessors, apply different mathematics to that appraised value or that taxed value. The Department of Revenue obviously determines that assessed value. The legislature determines the tax rates. That's also, I sat here feeling much grief for you guys, a moving target for you, because every 2 years they change, obviously, some of those tax rates, or can, they don't always. One of them that they're looking at this year is, of course, on that non-qualified agricultural large 20-acre parcels. And that will definitely affect the end result, which is the taxable value that the property or that the mill levies get applied against. The local governments determine the mills, rates, specials, fees and charges, and some of that you guys talked about. Fees are things such as the landfill or special assessments when it comes to stormwater or lighting districts. You guys know more about that than I do. Again, the market value is the tough part for me, but easier, like I said, than what you guys have, because I am using sales that occurred. I have to base everything off of what the market is doing. Mass appraisal is dependent upon accurate property characteristics, which is the first thing everyone should always check on our website when reviewing property data. It's why we come out to properties to review them. We get quite a bit of grief and live a very exciting life when people threaten us to get off their property. But once we use our charming personalities to remind them that the more accurate our data is, and that's the misunderstanding that everybody thinks they're getting over on the big bad DOR. Again, we simply are appraisers. Our valuation is used by the taxing jurisdictions to collect their tax dollars. So whether you like taxes or not, the more accurate our market value is, then at least under the current taxation system, you're being taxed fairly, which is obviously a tough thing for people to take. And so they usually succumb and recognize that that's in their best interest for us to update it. If you find something that's wrong, it's important you let us know. And in order for us to determine if that sale price is valid, we need accurate data. And listening to you guys, it's also important why we have relationships with the cities, counties, and state officials to make sure we get the permits, because that's also so important to each individual property owner, is us adding on the new construction. Supposedly, obviously, they share the responsibility then of everything that we're supporting, whether it be infrastructure or schools or otherwise. So notifying us of any changes to the property. The awkward part, and again, just to keep in mind with your planning, is we're again always working in the past. You guys are future forward-looking. If you add a new construction today, we wouldn't add it till next year on the tax rolls. So we're always, and then of course valuation, we're 2 years behind today. So we're always in a backwards looking function. So that does surprise some cities. You bring on the subdivision that you're just looking at, we won't add those new houses till the next year to the tax rolls, unless they're percent complete. The next one is regarding currently the property taxes. So we do the assessed value.
I got a question.
Oh, I apologize. Yes,
That's all right. When you have a subdivision that has been approved and they've gotten their final plat and they have vacant lots sitting there, they haven't sold or anything, is there a different way that gets evaluated out? Obviously, there probably is when it doesn't have a structure on it versus when it's just the bare land, but it has the improvements on it. Sidewalk, street, that kind of stuff.
Yes and no. So depending on its location and the extent of the actual development, we used to have a rule of the rule of 9, if you would, is as the tract of land was divided up and platted, it was obviously immediately legally described as those separate lots. However, we could still value, or we couldn't value it if it already satisfied 3 of 9, which meant the sidewalks, as you said, the roads, any electrical infrastructure, stormwater, anything like that. Now, thankfully, and that happened because of 2009 with all the subdivisions just sitting out there, and they might have already have done 5 of the 9 improvements for a subdivision. If they were still able to leave the main tract as open, we could satisfy that contiguously clause where the ownership was still in that same owner. They hadn't sold them out yet. So that's why, unfortunately, I have to say yes and no. But in a simple statement, if you subdivide something, and I am very involved with a lot of condos and try and get the word out there to the lawyers who are creating these declarations, do not declare it, get it approved obviously and everything, do not declare it until you're going to subdivide it. Because again, what you're just saying, you're going ahead and doing all those updates, so we're going to add it to the records for 20, so you're going to have a huge tax consequence. Your 40-acre parcel is now going to be 41-acre parcels that have that individual inherent value. So if you don't want that kind of tax consequence, do what this developer's doing, which is awesome, get the whole thing pre-approved, but only declare that first phase that any development in over time. We have several, the Woodlands, a couple others that got punished, they felt, because they declared them, but they weren't ready yet. But they still got the individual tax bills. So we have to value them as if vacant, so it isn't as much of an impact if it was improved, even if it has the site type improvements, as long as it doesn't have a house. So it can still be very impactful.
Okay.
What's that? Oh, sorry, Pip. So appraisal, assessment. Montana's one of the few, I think there's only 2 now, of the 50 states that does it the way we do it. I hope we continue. I'm getting ready to retire shortly. I won't matter, but I think it's smart talking to our everybody's concerned about property taxes going up, but in the state of Montana, we have less leeway to play favorites, if you will, because we aren't county assessors. I have no benefit if I raise or lower your value. My responsibility as a Department of Revenue appraiser is to make sure I can defend it. The counties, the cities are going to collect your taxes. So it's really kind of clean that way if I do my job right. Because then it goes to the legislature determining the tax classes based on what I have determined that the use of the property is. There's currently 16 property tax classes, and as we get down deeper, I'll show you the effect that those different classes have on a county like Flathead. The rates range from 29 to 15, and they can be adjusted for certain tax benefits, which I'm sure you guys get involved with some of your decisions on low-income housing benefits, exemptions for nonprofits, abatements, and the such. General assessment date is that January 1st, and as I said, the construction or deconstruction as of that date. We have some very savvy builders who don't start construction till January, February. That's smart. They have the opportunity to build everything out. It doesn't affect their cash coming out until the next year. So they can sell off quite a few of those properties the next year. Maybe one day we'll grow up and be like places we don't want to, where they do a certificate of occupancy and prorate for the year. That would just mean more people, I think, and cause quite a bit of grief, but that's just my personal opinion. And this isn't where we were at. So one day it could happen, but we just need a lot more people. The next page talks about the third leg. So now we've done the appraisal. The legislature says, okay, based on your use, it's residential, you're taxed at 1.35%. Then it goes to the county as a taxable value. So if I value your property at $400,000 and your residential property, the legislature says, county, you only get 1.35% of that value to add as a tax. So that's where that taxable value comes from. And it's a different tax rate, as I said in the previous slide, for different use types, which is huge, again, because I love that multi-use subdivision also, because then you're sharing that responsibility with different use types. And then, of course, we know there was the big concern and debate about the local or the state mills. That may or may not come up again, but most of our mills are handled through the local taxing jurisdictions, except for those 102.5, which here we only have we don't have the 1.5, so it's 101 mills. And again, I'm going kind of fast, but you can obviously ask questions. this is where I think the next slide helps you. It's kind of tiny, so hopefully you can see it better on your screen. These are the ones that, again, I'm not a tax person, I'm an appraiser, but we always try to make sure our property owners are educated about this process, because this is ultimately what affects us, which is our pocketbook. This is an example of this is the statewide tax base and statewide distribution from 2023. Again, this goes into the use types. So your property types, we've got general, there's again 16 class types, but we just generalized them: residential, commercial, ag, timber, proceeds, business equipment, and other. And the percentages statewide that are paid by each of those use types. Again, the market value is multiplied by the use type tax rate to get to the taxable value. So you can't go to this and automatically do the same math for each one, because the calculation's different. The best way for you to understand that is in the last slide. There's a website on the department website that shows you the certification of values for each county, and that one will be very helpful to you to do some of that math. But as you can see, for a point I want to make is the residential for statewide is at the $203 billion, and 57, almost 58% of it, of the total taxes paid was from residential, and 15% from commercial. But if you look at the next, and excuse me, sorry, PJ, before you turn on the distribution, now you can see how the taxes were paid. Now let's compare ourselves to Flathead County. And again, I wish I could put these side by side. If you go to the next slide, Flathead County, look at the residential, 76% of the tax base is paid. So that's where our property owners are feeling it more, and that's just because of the nature of our community. We don't have as much of the other use types as other counties do. We don't have the oil and gas distribution that they have. Business equipment obviously is less. Ag and timber, especially if the non-qualified ag gets included, will have a bigger effect on than the 0.3, but you can see 76% versus that 56% that was. So the way I see that, how it affects you guys, is really your decision making on these types of subdivisions. Mixed use are definitely going to, when you think about a commercial building or commercial property owner pays 1.89% of their appraised value. So if you have $1 million, that's the good thing also about the appraisal process for Montana, is you don't have to try and figure out what it costs to build plus the land value or what they paid for it, and you have a pretty good idea what market value is. Then you could do your percentages, 1.35 for residential or 1.89 for commercial, and you get an idea how adding a commercial business like that grocery store to that subdivision actually does more than just give them a place to go get food real close by. It also helps support that tax base just for that little community. And then you can see on the tax distribution side too, that the county, local, and state equalization, because of the way the tax base is also distributed higher for Flathead than other counties. So this is a direct reflection of what our market is doing, obviously. Residential properties are appreciating more than commercial properties, and whatever that class is that's going to appreciate faster is going to absorb most of that tax base. These numbers aren't obviously only a function, though, of the market. They are of the growth that that you guys are talking about here. Growth of one market value or one market type is going to affect your tax base more or less depending on how they appreciate or depreciate. Your residential properties are going to appreciate faster than commercial, as a general standard statement, obviously.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely, that's right.
Is multifamily at DOR commercial or residential?
Both. So that one's difficult. The legislature has determined that if you are a long-term, so monthly rental property, then you will get the residential tax rate. However, we value you, and as an appraiser, you're still considered by me as a commercial property, but just with residential use. So when you're approving apartments, duplexes, triplexes that are going to be rentals or long-term living, we have to decide if they're multifamily in any way. And I was noticing in that Senate bill you were talking about, that this is part of the conversation, that they said multifamily, I think, was a density of 8 or more. Well, we call them, whether they're duplexes, triplexes, for our purposes from an appraisal standpoint, the number of units gets considered, but they're all multifamily. So they get a residential tax rate, but they're valued based on the income approach, so they're considered a commercial property. Short-term living, it's based on, so all these VRBOs and things like that out there, ADUs that they're using for overnight stays, we still appraise them based on what the market would buy them as, meaning for like downtown Kalispell, if they're using an ADU as a VRBO, it would still be a residential property, so it would get the residential tax rate. That's an excellent question. Yeah, obviously, county to statewide numbers, the market value of $35 billion for the total in Flathead County, we're $269 billion of that overall value for 2023. So that's about 13% of the statewide for just one of the 56 counties. And of course, that's kind of follows suit with Missoula, Bozeman, as we know, we're the big ones. Total taxes paid, $220 million. In Flathead County, we were 220 billion. 2.34 billion in statewide, or about 9.5. So we paid about 10% of the total taxes paid in the state of Montana. I didn't say that very well, but it says it real well on the slide, sorry. So obviously, taxing jurisdictions levy more revenue, and that will cause a property tax increase. And they're going to do it, obviously, for all the right reasons: inflation, community growth, voted on mill levies, which again are the moving target for you guys. Budgets obviously can be for most people, but the voted ones make it even harder in a good way, but for the future. And then how your share of the property tax is affected. If yours increases, it's probably because you were lucky and bought an appreciating property, as what happened to a lot of the blessed people on Flathead Lake and Whitefish Lake, right? Or your property taxes your property may not be appreciating, but some other, say, all commercial businesses depreciate, so there's a decrease. That balance still has to, people say water balloon, water bed, that balance is still there, it just shifts. And of course, your property may be depreciating less rapidly. During 2015, when we did reappraisal, everybody expected their taxes would be cut in half because values had tanked after the 2008, 2009. But of course, they didn't. The valuations did go down, but the taxes, the budgets were still needed. So the mill levies, the tax rates and mill levies raised. And again, I won't hold you hostage. I'll leave these next few slides for you to try and, they're an illustration that tries to help you understand that question about multifamily versus commercial, the tax rate, understanding the three parts and how they ultimately affect each individual jurisdiction. So this one's just simply about an example of a base. Taxes are equal to the budgeted tax revenue multiplied by the property share of the overall tax base. So we give you a valuation for each property. We give you the tax rate for each property, and then determine what their taxable value is to show that effect, which is way too tiny, I apologize for you to see, on the taxing jurisdiction. So you can see in this example, because commercial property was all at 1.750, and there was only, 1.2 for the residential property, the 3 residential, but their tax rate is so much lower that they're only paying 33% of the overall valuation, or excuse me, overall taxes. The next example, this slide illustrates one reason why taxes might increase. Our value, in Montana, thankfully, we only reappraise every 2 years, so our value stays the same on every even year. We don't do a reappraisal. So we get quite a few calls of why their taxes are going up. It usually has to do with the, again, budget. The budget has changed, so they need to raise their mill levies in order to collect more taxes. Because the valuation didn't change and the tax rates didn't change, which I don't know if they ever would change in the middle of a cycle either. They'll only change during legislative session. And not unless there's an exemption. Thanks, Holly. Yeah, so you can see the base, what they're paying is still the same, even though they have to pay more because of the budget increase due to the inflation.
Real quick.
Yes.
Jared, a long time ago, we used to have I don't know if it was a calculated amount or whatnot, but it used to be, and this was before the boom and everything, but there was an amount that a house was valued at to where it paid enough into the city budget to offset the amount of services it pulls from the city. Have we looked at what that is currently with, where does that sit?
Yeah, we still have it. When we do an annexation, it's a bit of a guess, but it's an educated guess. Yes, based off of cost of services regarding streets, maintenance, all that, tax revenue. We try and make a development pay for itself, essentially. But yeah, we still have that. When you see an annexation, we have initial annexation, meaning basically just annexing it in, what's it going to cost, and then as it develops out, we do still have that. I think in the past it's not necessarily a requirement. It's just something that, especially back when the city was starting to grow real rapidly, there was concern whether it's paying for itself. I think over time it's kind of shown that they typically do. Other than, I think that's why I wanted the presentation as well, because there's so many things that affect your taxes going up. People see the growth and they automatically assume, well, the growth is why my taxes are going up. It's like, no.
Well,
it's
and
not,
the point,
but it actually helps.
and I don't know where it was like 300,000. This was 8 years ago. I think the last time I even thought about it.
Yep.
So it's more than that now, I would think. But the point about that is that, and I remember talking about this back then, the point about that is that's why it's so important to have the commercial end of it.
Yes.
Because it goes in and offsets any of those properties that may be below that amount that is coming into the city, and they're receiving the services, but they're not paying for all of them. That's why it's important to have the commercial aspect of it. It's been a long time since I thought about that.
Yeah. No,
I think it's been since like 2009 since I thought of it, so this has been quite a while for me too, but that used to be, that would be a good estimate.
We still have it.
Yeah. I could see what you're saying. It would be a moving target because that's the good thing. Hopefully they will not change again the cycle. It's the good thing about us valuing in the past. At least that part isn't moving as fast. So even when the market's changing, some people think that's a punishment, right? Because especially if the market goes down, well, Dawn, you're punishing me because I'm paying taxes based on the current or the past better market. But again, because as long as our value stays same, everybody else can digest and do the rest. You can do these multiplications of, if you have you can do the estimates of what the value is because it's out there. They're either paying it by their construction costs, and they have to tell you that, right? They're filling you in on that, or they already sold some, so you have that. Then their use type, based on whether it's commercial, you know that tax rate. You can get an estimate of taxes contributed, just like we do, which is using previous. The mill levies are the one thing that changes every year. They have to, but you can get that estimate of
The
taxes paid.
To be honest, one of the reasons it's been tricky the last few years is inflation, maintenance and
huge.
operations. I mean, we saw some of the public works budget go up 200% just based certain items of the public
Right.
works budget, like chlorine and those types of things that, it's hard.
Those are hard costs.
It's their costs that go into the maintenance of a system that was hard to project. But
And you have to do it now in real time, but you're using these real numbers. So, yeah, better man than me.
I wouldn't be surprised if that number wasn't sitting right around like 550 or 500, 550 or something like that, where that's the.
yeah, at a certain time, for example, that's why the diversity of housing is so important in commercial, which we talk about. There can be certain spectrums that don't want, like, say, the McMansion, or they only want townhouse. But a townhouse, for example, doesn't always pay for itself. You need the higher value, which that's one of the reasons I wanted this presentation. It shows the value of the house actually can make up for lower values, and why it's important to plan for industrial and commercial, just general job base, but it also affects the residential property rate as well. If you don't have commercial, your residential property taxes are going to be through the roof, so we need to be planning for that as well.
And when you set that number, Chad, what's your payback? How long is your payback? So if you say it's 550,000, is that for that initial investment?
Just the valuation of it.
Okay.
Yeah, just the value, because I'm looking at it here and I'm seeing it says 600,000 is about $6,900 on there. So I'm going through and saying that, maybe in between the 3 and the 600 might be where a lot of those places may fall for what it costs to provide services to a house.
Yeah, what Chad's talking about is the cost of services to the city. So it's for new properties that we, it's not really related to, he was having
Yeah, sorry
No,
about
that's-
that. Yeah,
no, that's
it's the
fine.
cost
That's what I
of
was just
services
trying to-
related to the city that it costs the city to serve a residential property.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Well, on the next slide, maybe that'll come more to what you're talking about. Well, not as much, no, but it does show you that impact of the choices you're making as far as the growth or the types of uses that are in our community, and how the impact for the actual taxes collected is affected by appreciation or depreciation. In this example, property values appreciated, but at different levels. Again, residential is usually going to outpace your commercial, and unless you say commercial apartments, which of course we're well beyond that, which it's a residential use. In recent years, obviously, the residential properties have been appreciating more. This example shows that shift that occurs, and we, of course, feel this a lot in Flathead County with those numbers we saw earlier of 76% of the taxes being paid by the residential versus other tax use types. Commercial property only appreciated about 20%, while residential properties doubled in value. And then the next slide again is the last scenario to show how the shift happens when there's a combination, which obviously is more real world, of the need for increased revenue, whether it be from inflation and services and everything else going up, as well as there's a appreciating market. And this is the changes in taxes levied by the taxing jurisdiction and the changes in the tax base are usually what we're experiencing regularly. But in this case, we've had people who have been quite upset with us because the percentage change in taxes for some of our commercial properties, even though their value went up, reduced because the residential offset it so much that they picked up more of that tax burden. Thank you. That wasn't too brutal. I apologize that it was a little haphazard, but these websites, the one as far as planning that I think is always very helpful for anyone who uses the valuations to determine their revenue, obviously, is the review current and past certification of values for individual counties. That can, obviously, you still have to be a forecaster. You have to understand, obviously, real estate as well as inflation and markets and how all these things are going to affect you. But that can show you historically how Flathead County has valued since, I can't remember, how far does it go back? It's at least 10 years, I'm pretty sure. And of course, currently we're number 2 as far as overall valuation, market value of properties. But what's good about that is it shows you again the importance of use, which has come up several times, encouraging some more of this multi-use to offset and not overburden our residential property owners, though they might not like it or want it. Understanding that they will then share it with these other use types is helpful. So, does anybody have any questions?
No, thank you. It was informative. Good to have that.
Longer than 15 minutes, I apologize.
Are we gonna have any taxes from the federal, like tax cuts, the county and all? Possibly the next couple of years?
Maybe. I don't know. Is there the next part of that? Oh, I see. There it is.
Hey, Planning Commission. My name is Fred Bika. I'm the Assistant Director of Parks and Recreation. And thanks for letting me come talk tonight about what we have going on and where we're kind of going in the future. We'll just kind of work through this. Parks and Rec has 2 different disciplines, parks and then recreation. Our parks kind of include kids sports, our urban forestry program, our trails, building maintenance is one of my favorites. In the recreation, they're dealing with youth camps, youth sports, community events, and community enrichment programs. Our parks, we have about 30 of them here in Kalispell, and 540 acres of land, 383 turf acres, 72 natural area acres, 85 undeveloped. We'll talk about that in a bit. 19 playgrounds, 12 pavilions. I think there's 9 basketball courts. Where we're responsible for gardens around town and Woodland Park. There's two awesome gardens there. The streetscape, we partner with the BID to work with that. Out in front of the police station, that landscaping there is the park's responsibility. So a lot going on. And of course, the pond's a favorite in the wintertime, so we keep that cleared whenever we finally get some cool weather, which finally happened. So we were able to do that. Kids sports, our Kalispell Youth Athletic Complex is a state gym here in Kalispell, 138 acres of sports fields. And you can see the wide list there. Brings in a ton of tournaments and things like that. So it kind of works as a partnership with Kids Sports. They kind of run the programming side of it. They work with all the user groups, and we maintain the turf that they play on all the fields. That's about $250,000 to maintain that facility each year. Urban forestry is another big one for Kalispell. We got about 11,000 trees in our parks and boulevards. We can zoom into your neighborhood and take a look at the trees out in front of your place and tell the history of maintenance for that tree and what needs to be done and what's going on with it. Our goal is to prune all large trees bigger than 5 inches in diameter. They get pruned every 7 years. And then our smaller trees are pruned on a 3-year cycle where we're trying to set up good structure for those, so we don't have to spend so much money printing when they get bigger. So you'll see us out there. We have an urban forestry committee, similar to yourself, that helps advise and helps promote the program. And then Arbor Day is kind of the big Super Bowl for urban forestry. All our third graders get to come to a park and hang out with people of environmental professionals throughout the day, plant a bunch of trees, do some tree climbing, stuff like that. Trails is another big piece. We have 9 miles of trails within Kalispell that we're responsible for. The Parkline Trail is the mecca of trails, I guess, our 2-mile linear park through town. Another cool one is the Nature Trail at Lawrence Park that goes through the backwaters of the Stillwater there. A lot of maintenance, keeping those open in the wintertime, plowing and things like that. Building maintenance, again, we're responsible for City Hall, for the Public Safety Building, and for Fire Station 62 as well. And that includes the daily cleaning and maintenance of those facilities, and then all the HVAC and roofing and flooring and plumbing, and electrical, and even parking lots. So next, recreation. We have about 40 different programs each year, from soccer to 3-on-3 basketball. Right now we're running ice skating programs at the Woodland Park there. So awesome stuff. We also have youth camps. Our after school program has about 40 to 50 kids each day that come to Elrod School, and we hang out with those kids and do programming with them. And then our summer camp runs all summer long, and it has about 80 to 100 kids in that program each day. Woodland Water Park is the city's swimming pool. I think last year 985 swim lessons were taught, so that's pretty awesome that kids are getting exposed to water in a safe manner. We were fortunate to get a LWCF grant a couple years ago, and that's kind of a work in progress. New boilers for those 3 pools. Last year we were able to refurbish the water slides. This year we'll be installing a liner in the lap pool. And then next year we're hoping to resurface the lazy river. We were able to add 2 staff this last year, bringing us to a total of 19 full-time employees. And then our big staff is our 100 or so seasonals that help run all the different things we do. Kind of looking to the future, this Ashley Park is going to be a pretty amazing thing. I'm sure you guys are all aware of the Bibler family donation that's coming, and that's going to be kind of a regional park for us, and we're really looking forward to that. It's just going to have a lot of amenities and project the Bibler Gardens down there as well, so that'll be pretty amazing. Out off West Spring Creek is a 60-acre retention area, but it's also created some nice fields for us for the future. So we're hoping to use that for adult activities and sports and things like that. So that's kind of on the horizon. And then right now we're out to for an RFQ for our master plan update. It's been 20 years coming, really needed, and we're hoping to get that done it'll take probably 12 months to accomplish, but give us guidance for the next 10 years, evaluate our current conditions, and then give us some realistic goals with the budgets that we have to move forward. And some of the things we're hoping to gain from it, look at future growth and needs of the community, assess what we have and some deficiencies that are there. We're hoping to be able to do a community needs assessment and wants and desires, engage our partners and assess the maintenance of both deferred and future, and analyze staff and funding. So with that is all I have for you tonight. Willing to take any questions you have.
Oh, we're good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And then I guess the last one. 2 more hours. All right.
I got Disney on my phone for the kids if they
All
want.
right. Disney?
Oh, seriously? It's like, I'm kidding. She's kidding. She's kidding.
So last time I went through all our facility plans. Last time I talked about our different facility plans ad nauseum, and I think I was concerned I was gonna have to go get the defibrillator for council members or commissioners. But this will be a lot simpler. PJ asked a month ago that if I would talk about private utilities, how we incorporate them into our new designs as they're coming in, what are the considerations for private utilities?